Hey everyone, Curse Deck Builder here, making our way to 10,000 decks assisted, and here we are with Vorel of the Hull Clade, a counter doubling deck. This is one of our 2 donation decks for the week, and it comes from Mick Yeager, who says they're looking for help with consistency and efficiency. This is my first deck, and I'm proud seeing my deck do its thing, so anything that can help that. I'm newer to Magic, so looking forward to seeing some cool interactions or cards I didn't know exist. I've sideboarded a lot of interaction, but I used to run a lot of fights. And their deck building restriction is a budget of $100. Thank you so much, Mick Yeager. Thank you for sending your deck, and I'm excited to take a look at it. I think the deck is pretty good, and I have a few suggestions, less so on putting tons and tons of cards in, but kind of rearranging a few of the numbers and adjusting a few of the things we can do. So I'm excited to show it to you, and I hope you like it. If you'd like to take a look at the deck list we're talking about today, or if you'd like to submit your own deck list to me so that I can make a video assisting your deck, please check the video description down below. So who is Vorel of the Hull Clade, and why are they our doubling counter commander? Vorel of the Hull Clade is 3 mana in Simic, 1 green blue. They are human merfolk, 1/4, and they have only 1 ability and the main reason you play them. For a green and a blue and tapping them, you double the number of each kind of counter on target artifact, creature, or land. Very straightforwardly, the whole idea of this deck is to put lots of counters on permanents, double those counters, and use that to make our creatures stronger, more resilient, or just generally better than they're meant to be at the speed they usually grow. So thankfully, a counter deck in green and blue is mostly straightforward, and generally I do really like this deck. There's a few things here and there that I think are worth noting, but generally we have a nice collection of 2 to 3 mana cards that are really good with counters. We have things that add counters to our creatures. We have a lot of really good enchantments to support them. Our artifacts are pretty good. We have fun win conditions like the Millennium Calendar, or Sage of Hours, or was there one more? Simic Ascendancy, that's the last one, which I think are all fun and flavorful and don't hold the deck back. We have some really strong cards such as Vorel, and of course some fun things that we can just do, such as Champion of Lambholt, making it harder for our opponents to block, Gyre Sage making tons and tons of mana, etc, etc. So generally I like the deck. Let's take a look at the curve where I noticed my first kind of problem, which also coincides with our lands, is that we're very much so on our 3 mana plan. And of course, as I say in a lot of my videos, this is kind of troubling because our commander is 3 mana as well. Now, our commander kind of exists in a weird space where we don't necessarily need to get Vorel out as fast as possible, because we need them to be out and we need creatures with +1/+1 counters to be out. So there's the situation where we can kind of wait a little bit. We can start developing our game plan, and then later we put out Vorel. And with Vorel out, we can then start doubling the creatures we already have, which isn't bad, but I do feel like there is a bit of a problem here, where even if that's the plan, we do have a lot of 3-drops. And that's probably where I'm going to try to pick out a few of the cards that I think are probably a bit weaker. And getting there, we should also talk about lands a little bit. We're at 35 lands, 36 including MDFCs, and that's, I think, fine. We do have a pretty big collection of 5-drops, which is, I guess, another place I should kind of poke at. So with that, I wouldn't mind going up 1 or 2 lands. There's other land or mana ramp that I'm going to be suggesting, but until we get there, I think for sure adding 1 or 2 lands, I think, is a really easy thing to do. So let's look at some of these cards. Let's look at 5 and 3 because they are the most notable. Whereas 6 we have Vorel, which I think is an excellent finisher for the deck. Experiment Kraj, which is really silly in a deck like this, and has a lot of situations where it can just go infinite by untapping itself, and then untapping itself, tapping it, using a lot of different tapping for mana, using a lot of different cards. I think Free for the Real is the main one, but there might be a few others to just consistently take advantage of the fact that you can just create so much mana and just go off and win. So I think that's fine. But looking at our 5 drops, we have quite a few, and they're not all equal, I would say. So our enchantments are kind of the core idea of doubling, so I don't want to push too hard on it. Now, I'm a big believer that you only need one of these doubling effects. Primal Vigor and Doubling Season pretty much do the same thing, right? They both double, and they do work well together. But I personally like having only one of these kind of cards in the deck. However, the whole point of the deck and the whole point of the commander is doubling them. So I think that's fine. I think it's fine to have an extra one in here. The deck gets really, really silly. And of course, we have a bunch of doublers that work, you know, in different ways, such as Colonian Hydra, which I think is very, very strong. So I don't want to be cutting out all of these doubling effects for sure. But looking at what we have, sorry, my phone is not, there we go. Looking at all of these cards here, though, I do want to cut some. And the thing is, they're all very, very strong. So maybe it's better to rank them in strength and pick it out that way instead of trying to find out which one's the weakest to pull out. So Doubling Season, Primal Vigor, I would say they're the strongest for sure. The Hydra also is very, very powerful. Seedborn Muse with our commander and a bunch of our other cards works very well too. So I would say those are probably the 4 strongest. After that, Paradox Zone is really, really interesting. I do like how it works, but it's kind of slow. You know, it only creates 1 creature per turn cycle, which is yours. And that creature is very, very big. And it does work very well with creating double tokens with Doubling Season or Primal Vigor. But like contextually, that means we have to have played multiple 5-mana enchantments, and then we have to wait for them to do something, right? Let's say we have like the magical, like what is like the output? So we go to our end step. This gets a +1/+1 counter. Then it tries to put, this gets a counter. Then it tries to put try to put 1/1/1 into play. But because of, let's just say, Doubling Season, it'll put 2 2/2s into play. Now, if we're able to actually double the counter that initially comes on this, which I do believe Doubling Season would do, instead we'd get it try to make 1 2/2, and it would make 2 4/4s. Is that good enough? And I would argue probably not. It feels cool, but it's incredibly slow. Even if the situation was, it would create 2 8/8s on the first turn, or 2 10/10s. Even then, I don't think I'm really interested in this. It's just a lot of work to get, like, 2 5-mana enchantments, including one of the strongest enchantments in your deck, in order to enable just another 5-mana enchantment. So with that in mind, I feel like in this kind of setup, it's a little too clunky, and I think Paradox Zone is a weaker one. The other 2, Iridescent Hornbeetle, is really, really cool, and I do want to keep this because it allows us to go incredibly wide, so I do like this. However, Tanazir Quandrix, I don't like as much, right? Like, they're meant to work with fractals and creatures with really low power and toughness. And that's not what your deck is. It does give, you know, an addition to all the counters, and when they ETB, it does double all your counters. But this is very much so kind of a payoff if you're already winning. Because otherwise, it's just going to put, like, imagine you just have a bunch of creatures that have 1 counter on them. Then this reads put a +1/+1 counter on each creature that has a +1/+1 counter. And that's not very, very strong. And if you're in the situation you have 3 or 4 +1/+1 counters on your creatures, well, then you don't really need this, right? You're already winning. So Tanazir Quandrix is the second one I'd take out. So for me, it would be the Paradox Zone and Quandrix would be the ones I'd pull out. So that's what I'm thinking about 5 mana. Looking at our 3 mana, and this is the main place I want to pick at a little bit, is mainly our mana ramp, but let's make our way over there. Kasmina, I think, is fine, works kind of interestingly. Kyora is much stronger. I think Kasmina is just kind of cute. I don't think we have anything to cheat out with our ultimate, which the whole idea is what makes it very, very quick, or like very, very strong. Let's see, instance. Yeah, we don't have anything really to cheat out, so Kasmina would be on the cutting room floor for me. I just don't really like this. You're not playing enough Planeswalkers to really be taking advantage of the +2, and though it is useful to give Kiora a plus, she's plenty strong by herself, right? Looking at her creatures, Champion of the Lambholt, I think this is fine. Irith of the Healing House, I think is close. I think it works really well with some of your giving abilities to things like the ooze at the end, the experiment crash. But even then, I think it's just kind of okay. Yeah, I think sometimes it's going to be strong and sometimes it's just going to be weak. And I don't know if I like this over Kiora's Follower, which already does this better, right? We're paying an extra mana to have this to be a little more tricky and sometimes untap 2 creatures, and I don't know if that's good enough. So at 3 mana, just to kind of, you know, take some pressure off the 3 mana slot, I would cut this for sure. Llanowar Visionary, absolutely would cut this. We're gonna play 1 mana dorks. We don't need a 3 mana dork, even though they draw a card when they enter the battlefield. Without blink, without a lot of like elves, we don't really want this, so easy cut. Pride Malkin's great to give all your creatures trample, our commander. So our Cultivate, Kadama's Reach, Scale the Heights even, and I think that's it. Let's look at these 3. So this is something I talk about every now and then, and it is ramp and the purpose of ramp in our decks. To go over it again, the idea is generally there are 3 kinds of ramp in Commander. There is 1 mana ramp, which tend to be found on creatures or permanents that can be removed, such as enchantments. They tend to be easier to deal with. They tend to deal with summoning sickness, mainly the creatures, but they let you get to that midpoint of the game faster. There's 2 mana ramp that tends to put lands into play and is generally the safest, or what we would call mana rocks would also be that, and are generally what decks want when they're trying to hit 4 and outside of green. But once we hit 3 mana and above, we're hitting the mana ramp where we're trying to really, really ramp. We're trying to go from like 3 to 5 is what Cultivate allows us to do it, or like 4 to 6, 5 to 8, that kind of stuff, right? We're trying to get to really, really high numbers. So Cultivate here and Kadama's Reach, and even honestly Scale the Heights, all feel out of place because when we look at our deck and we're looking at the curve, which is why I really like this site, we can see both of these at the same time, is that we can see our problem is not to get from 3 to 5, our problem is to hit 3 in general. That's the main place we want to be. So these cards are being played when we've already made the first goal of our deck. So I don't think they belong here. We're going to cut them and we're going to try to put lower mana ramp instead. Put a Visions of Dominance, put a +1/+1 and then double it, and then with Flashback we can double it for what's 10 -3s for 7. I don't know if I like this. I think it's fine. For a lot of creatures, there's going to be put 2 +1/+1 counters on it, and sometimes it's going to be very, very good and put like 30. But our commander does this, right? So why do we need this on another card that's also the same mana cost? Generally, I don't like this card. If it was any other mana, even if it was a 4 mana, I'd probably like it a bit more, but here I really don't like it, so that's an easy cut as well. At our instance, we have Inspiring Call, which is very strong because it protects our creatures. Invigorating Surge, which does the exact same thing of the previous card I didn't like without Flashback. So I also want to cut this, but you could keep one of them probably at this point. But not this one, I keep the better one. But this one, both of them I don't particularly like. I will say the instant of it makes it a bit stronger because it allows it to be a combat trick. But even then, it's just a bad version of your commander. And we have better ways to put that first +1/+1 counter on our creatures. At our artifacts, we have Commander Sphere. We don't need this card. 3 mana to either draw a card or tap for any color. We're in green, we're in 2 colors. We don't need this. Very easy to cut. Fractal Harness is one... I don't dislike this. I never love this. Every time I see it, it can be very, very strong. But once again, if it's not on the fractal and your creatures don't have +1/+1 counters, it's not very, very good. It takes a lot of mana like it has an equip 2, and you need to put at least 4 if you want a creature attached to it. I don't know. I don't like this, but if you keep it, I won't send you to jail. To me, it's always a difficult card. It looks really good on paper, but I find it's very clunky. So your experience with it will probably judge what you want to do with it. Let's see. Patriars? It's like Patriarchs. Yeah, there we go. Patriarch Seal. Let's see, my English is going really well today. So this one untaps legendary creatures we control. That's the main reason to use this. I feel like we could get this for cheaper. Do we have methods to untap a creature for less mana than this? In like artifacts or something. I'm not sure. I think we have 2 mana creatures that'll allow us to do this. I think we should do that. I'll check when we're looking through cards. I'm pretty sure there are definitely cards that untap a permanent at 2 mana, and I would prefer that. 1,000-Year Elixir, on the other hand, though it's 3 mana, gives haste and 1 in an untap. Love this. This is fine. Finally, going into enchantments, Branching Evolution obviously is very strong in the deck. Freed from the Real is close. I know it's really, really good with certain combos, but it is a clunky card when you're not using it, and you don't even want to use it on your commander because you need tons of mana. Like, this is a card we attach to... Where is it? Where's our 2? Incubation Druid, right? Because that allows us to have infinite mana, which I really, really like. But we don't have ways of pulling these cards out of our deck, so it's kind of a one-off combo. And with that in mind, I don't like it as much, but I think it's fine that it can stay. Hadana's Climb, I think, is pretty strong, especially the fact that we can flip it. I think this is great. Hydra's Growth, once again, just fine. I don't mind it. And Rhystic Study is very, very good. So those are generally the cards I'm looking at that I want to pick on. Stonecoil Serpent also feels a little weak to me, but you know, you play it as a 1/1 and then you slowly double it is not a bad thing. So I don't mind it so much. I believe there was one more. I swore there was one more that I was looking at that I wanted to get rid of, but I can't think of it right now. Oh well. I think generally the rest of it I really do like, so let's just get into additions and what I would like to add in. So let's see if I can find that untap firm on a creature, if I remember correctly, and then we'll go green, blue, search. And we wanted it to be 2 mana. So we only have 8 cards. Turn face up. Untap another. Oh no, that is tap another snow permanent. Untap, tap. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm thinking one that untaps lands. Let's try putting in creature. Let's see. When it attacks, untap creature. Untap creature. I want it as an activated ability. Untap target creature. So even these, I think this one would probably be the best one, right? Yeah. So this one would be the one I'd play, right? Unfortunately, it seems we have to go pretty far back to get a $74. You'll have to get the Tempest one for 7 if you don't like white border. But I think this is the one I would play over the other ability. Obviously, it's free to play. It's a creature you can put +1/+1 counters on. I do generally like that, so I think I would play this. I'm surprised there's not more. Maybe I'm thinking untap land where there's a lot. But still, this does what we want it to do, so this is the one I would suggest. All right, let's start looking into the other additions. And as mentioned before, the main thing I would like to do is replace all that mana ramp that I suggested we take out with 1 mana green creatures that tap for mana. Now, obviously, I believe you have, let's see, you have the Elvish Mystic and the Llanowar Elves. So the next ones would be like Finehorn Elves, would be like Vorel Druid, Gilded Goose, and I think that's where I would stop, unless there's anything else. Yeah, those are the ones I would play. Obviously, Birds of Paradise is very strong. If you have the, well, we do have the budget for it, so maybe get that. Oh, I hate that it won't let me do this if I don't do that. All right, that one's really, really strong, and that one can fly. So as we put +1/+1 counters, so If we're going with budget, I would say Birds of Paradise, Gilded Goose, Finehorn Elves, and then if you really wanted Boreal Druid, but I feel like that's a bit overkill. Those three are really strong. Obviously the flyers are really good when we put +1/+1 counters on them. But all of these creatures, the main goal is to get our 3 drops out on the second turn. It makes a huge difference to start dropping them, start making mana, start getting further in the game, put out our commander early. So these creatures are just very, very powerful to do that. So these are the biggest recommendations I have. After that, I want a few other ways to put +1/+1 counters on this in this deck. I feel like we have a lot of ways to double, but we have a few ways to put that initial one, especially when we're adding cards that have nothing to do with +1/+1 counters, such as these elves. Being able to put those counters on them needs to be easy and not like, you know, paying mana or using a spell. Like, we want it to be like something that we can work with really, really easily and get ahead at the same time. So Song of Freyalise is one of my favorites of this. It gives you 2 turns of your creatures tapping for mana, and then on last turn you get that full +1/+1 counter, a bunch of really relevant abilities, including Vigilance and Indestructible, so you get a free attack, and then after that attack, you continue to build up your board. Really, really strong. I think it's a very easy inclusion. After that, one that I thought was notably missing was Kami of Whispered Hopes. I know this is 3 mana. I have a few 3 mana drops, even though I said we should try to cut down on them. These ones I think are strong enough to be worth it. Kami of Whispered Hopes not only is another, not doubler, but additional counter. Obviously, then we get to add mana to its power plus its +1/+1 counters. So this creature also works really well with Freed from the Real, but also just generally, if you could put 3 or 4 counters onto this creature, it taps for tons of mana. So very, very good inclusion. One of my favorites is Arwen, Weaver of Hope. If you like the Lord of the Rings cards, this is definitely a card that I think is very strong, because unlike all of those other 3 mana creatures that say other creatures enter with a +1/+1 counter, this she grows incredibly fast and it's equal to her toughness. So you spend a little time putting a few +1/+1 counters on her, and all of a sudden all of your creatures come in with a ton of +1/+1 counters. Very similar to Master Biomancer, and it's just nice to have that redundant effect. After that, we have Renata. This is just another creature that says your creatures come in with +1/+1 counters. I think this one's fine. I don't think you need this many, but I think if you wanted a little redundancy in the effect, she's there for you. One more, and I think this one is probably the strongest one, is Defiler of Vigor. Not only does this this triggers repeatedly, it reduces the mana cost on a lot of your cards. The majority of your deck is green. The majority of your deck is green permanents. And so very, very quickly, you're going to find yourself boosting your entire team, setting it up for really, really good doubles. And the fact that it itself is a trample creature is fantastic. I think this is probably, I've forgotten already, but I'm pretty sure this is the strongest card that I'm suggesting by itself. So this is a pretty big suggestion. After that, there's this. When I was searching, I found it. This is a very, very interesting creature. I forget what these creatures are called, like axolotls or something. But apparently here it's a salamander, so what do I know? What I do like mainly is that, so it starts turning things into islands, which is not really big for us. I think it's just kind of nice to have more mana fixing, or if we can get Island Walk or something. Like, this is a card that you could add in and put some cards in to kind of make it work around. So if you can put some Island Walk and use this, you're going to be in a really good situation. But obviously the main idea of this is on your end step, you get an untap on all your permanents, which includes all the lands that have a flood counter on it, right? And with that in mind, I think this is just another version of our Seedborn Muse, while being on a pretty big creature, which is kind of nice. The ability to untap a lot of your mana dorks and creatures that have activated abilities is really, really nice. So I think even though we're not going to get like 10 untaps with an ability like this, I think they themselves, they're really, really strong, right? And getting that first untap is the most powerful one. So I really like this, but it is 6 mana, so there is a limit on what we're going to get out of it. Here's a new card I really like, Pick Your Poison. I haven't gotten to play with it. My friend played it at a Modern tournament yesterday, and I didn't actually get to ask how well it did, but this is a very, very good card, I think. Each opponent sacrifices a card. By itself is already a very strong ability. Just pick anything, honestly. Generally, you're going to pick artifact, but enchantment and creature with flying can like snipe really powerful targets. I mean, this is a creature that deals with my decks really, really well. I have Brina, so 1 mana, sacrifice a flying creature. I put out, Smothering Tithe, 1 mana, sacrifice an enchantment. All of a sudden, you're like severely hobbling the player who played these cards while getting maybe incidental value from your other 2 opponents. Fantastic card, very easy to play. And then I have some just generic cards that, I love suggesting. Beast Within is a card I like playing in every green deck. It is 3 mana. Once again, I'm being a bad boy and telling you to play the card of the mana value that I would like you to kind of cut down on. What can you do? Beast Within is just a very, very good card. It lets you deal with any permanent of any kind in exchange for a 3/3. And as you are a +1/+1 counter deck, 3/3s don't particularly bother you, right? So really good trade, and I think you're very happy with that. Fog. The more I played, the more I really appreciate Fog as a one-of in green decks, white decks, and black decks. They're the only ones with a 1 mana, so white is Holy Day, and black is Darkness, though I'm pretty sure Darkness costs way too much compared to the others. Yeah, it's about $5. I did get a reprint, I forgot about that. And then Holy Day is also pretty cheap, thankfully. So Fog, I think these effects are really nice as a one-off in certain decks because it does stop you from losing to just some random stuff of your opponent. It stops certain opponents from getting incredibly high value turns. I'm thinking things like, creatures that need to hit your opponents or deal damage for their triggers, or commanders that care about these kind of things, or situations where, they combo off and they're using creature damage or attacks to get that final win. Fog is just a really, really clean answer. And that's not including things where you get blown out by I would say like a combat trick where all your opponent's creatures have protection from a color and it's your color all of a sudden. Fog can at least give you an undo button to get out of that. We are a very creature-based deck, and generally we are the biggest creatures around, and keeping a few creatures back allows us to basically block anything. However, that's not always the case, right? And we do want the ability to kind of attack with impunity. And having Fog in hand allows you to just hold up 1 mana and attack with all your very large creatures. And just if you get into a position where you regret someone does a huge turn, boosts all their creatures and attacks you, Fog is going to be there to protect you. So that's my spiel on it. I really do like it. Very, very good card. I think these are my last 2 cards. I think it is Pongify and it should be Rapid Hybridization. Both just very, very strong cards. Just 1 mana removal. Same way as Beast Within. These are 1 mana and they destroy creatures. They give them a 3/3. Once again, you don't really care about 3/3s. 3/3s are fine. These cards are especially Pongify is a little past the budget I like suggesting. However, we've got a $100 budget. We should use it. Pongify is a great card for that. Pick up more for your other blue decks, honestly. This is a very strong card. And that's it. Once again, this is a deck I do really, really like. I like the direction it's going in. I think, this is your first deck. You've done a very, very good job. I think you should be happy about that. The deck has a lot of flow to it. It has a very, very strong direction to go into. I think after this, the next steps I would be looking at would be probably card draw. Something I didn't suggest and I should have is Harmonize. Harmonize is a card I also like suggesting in any green deck, as drawing cards is really, really strong. But before we go into too much of that or get into that, the deck itself I think is already in a good position. I think mid to slightly higher mid power level, it'll do very, very well. After that, we do have to talk about maybe fixing the land base a little bit. There's a lot of forests and very few islands, even though we're a mostly green deck. We could be using a lot more non-basics. A little more card draw would be nice, but for a first-time deck, you've done a great job, and I'm very, very happy to see it. So with that in mind, I hope this was helpful. Thank you so much, McYager, because thank you for supporting the channel, but there's also a fun deck to look at. I haven't seen Vorel in a very, very long time. There's so many, actually, let's do the full one. There's so many really, really powerful, +1/+1 counter commanders these days, and I think Vorel brings something really, really interesting with the doubling factor. So really happy you built this. I hope these suggestions help, and I'd love to see another version of the deck. All right, good luck. Thank you so much for watching. This video is brought to you by viewers like you and people on my Patreon. If you'd like to send me another draft of this deck, or any deck, there is a link in the video description down below. And if you'd like to make your deck one of my donation decks I work on, there's a link there too. Finally, if you'd like to like, comment, subscribe, I would be very appreciative. It helps the channel quite a bit. Thank you and good luck in brewing and building.